Thank you. First of all, thank you for coming to my home. I'm very glad to host you all here today. Yes, my name is Ms Brewer. I'm the newly arrived U.S. Ambassador to the Kingdom of Lesotho. I arrived here in mid-February, so it's been a little over 2 months that I've been here. I'm very excited to represent the U.S. to the Kingdom of Lesotho, and I've already started to meet people and start to see the country, so I'm very, very excited to be here. A little bit about me. I am a native of one of our states in the Midwestern part of the U.S., in the middle of the U.S. It's called Indiana. I was born there some nearly 50 years ago, and I was raised in a small town and lived there until I graduated from university. And then I joined the State Department, and I have been with the Department of State for almost 26 years. And I've traveled all over the world, quite a bit in Africa, as well as in South and Central Asia. So that's sort of me in a nutshell, but I'm happy to answer more specific questions.
Okay. Maybe most of us don't know Indiana that well, but we know one famous family from the Jacksons.
Oh, yes!
Michael Jackson, of course. Basically, what are your passions? What are your interests? Are you into music as well, seeing as you come from Indiana, where we have the man who, still in the Guinness Book of Records for the biggest selling album ever. 50 million copies of Thriller.
Yes, I remember. Thriller came out in the early 80s. I was born in the early 70s, so I was a young kid when it came out, and I remember it being on all the radio stations when I was a child. So certainly, Gary, Indiana, actually my family lived in Gary, Indiana for the first 5 years of my life. And that's where we started out in Northwest Indiana. So I didn't know the Jacksons. They were already famous by the time I was born. But yes, they were legendary even then. Indiana is interesting because, like Lesotho, we grow corn, and here I know maize is one of the staple crops that people eat, so we have that in common. And when I drive past fields of maize, it reminds me of my childhood in Indiana. One thing that is very different here, though, is that Indiana is incredibly flat. Most of the state is flat, like a pancake. Whereas, of course, Lesotho is the mountain kingdom, so that is one major difference between the two. But I'm enjoying the beauty of this country so much. And when I was a child in Indiana, it was a lovely place to grow up, but it was not very exciting. So I would read a lot, and I loved to read, and I would read about these faraway countries and exciting places, the pyramids in Egypt, the Taj Mahal, so many of the wonders of the world, safaris, in Southern Africa, and I would just think, wow, what would it be like to see these places? And I have to say, because of my job with the State Department, I have visited all of those places that I dreamed about, and even more than I ever thought. So that's been exciting, for a kid from a small town in Indiana.
I see. Yeah, you do speak about the flat terrain in Indiana, and here it is the mountain kingdom, probably the highest country in the world, so to speak. Is that the reason why you were in Tavabusi to climb up the mountain very recently?
Well, I was honored not long after I arrived to take part in the Moshweshwe Day festivities. It was right after I presented credentials to His Majesty King Letsie III. So I was able to go to that event, and so beautiful. People were wearing, their native costumes, their national dress. Saw dances and singing, and even participated in one of the dances. But I didn't get to go to the top of the mountain. Only the King and Prime Minister did. And I was talking to some colleagues, and they were saying, "Oh, you should go up to the top. That's where the actual tomb is, and the remains of the first villages that were established by King Moshweshwe the First, when he made that his sort of headquarters." So something I wanted to do, and talking to my staff, and we thought, well, it would be a wonderful experience to go there with all of the U.S. Embassy staff as a community, and to show our respects to the founder of the Basotho Nation, King Moshweshwe the First, as well as sort of enjoy that day as a community, as a group, but then also to have fun and to do some hiking. So we did a hike and we did some barbecue, some braai, which I know is very popular here. And we just made it a wonderful community event. It was a good time. So as well as, learning about the culture, the history. We had a wonderful guide who told us all about, how King Moshoeshoe and his, people had come there and the history. And so it was a great learning experience.
Okay, so you've been to several African countries. Would you care to maybe say which ones, what experiences you probably took back from each one of them?
Sure. My first posting when I joined the Foreign Service back in 1996 was to Lagos, Nigeria. It was, at the time we had our U.S. Embassy there. It was a big, bustling city, quite different again from where I grew up. Millions of people. Lagos is so vibrant, and people are always like selling and buying and hawking in the streets. There's so many things happening there. So that was quite the change, and I really, it was my first experience with the State Department. I got to learn a lot in that posting. Then after that, I went to Freetown, Sierra Leone. At the time, Sierra Leone was in the midst of a civil war. They had a civil war for nearly 10 years. And so I was privileged to be part of the U.S. Embassy team there that was trying to help them reach peace. And I was able to go to the Lomé Peace Accords signing, which really helped them move along to the path to peace. And it was so satisfying to be part of the rebuilding of that country. After that, I spent a number of years in Washington and in South Central Asia, India, Pakistan, Sri Lanka. But I always thought of Africa, and I worked in Washington, D.C. on Africa issues in the State Department, in the Africa Bureau, we call it. And then when I had the chance, I came back to Nigeria as the number 2 in the embassy, and was there for 3 years as the number 2 in the U.S. Embassy in Abuja, Nigeria. Then after that, I went to Freetown, Sierra Leone as the U.S. ambassador, almost 20 years after I had been posted there the first time. So it's been a wonderful full circle event. But this is my first time in Southern Africa. I had visited here, not Lesotho, but this region of the continent in the past. But this is my first time really living here in this part of Africa.
So how do you find, apart from the cold that's starting to creep in, how do you find Lesotho? Its people, the politics, the country in general, how do you find it? What are your first 2 months? First 2 months, is it? Yeah.
First 2 months. It's an exciting place. It is physically beautiful. I mean, the vistas here are unparalleled. They have the dramatic mountains, they have the valleys. It's so gorgeous. I took a trip to Madiba Lodge, in that part in the northern part of the country, and just driving there, I was leaning out the window taking photos with my phone the whole time, and just seeing the beautiful wildflowers and sheep herders and goats and all kinds of very beautiful pastoral things. So you have this wonderful natural beauty. But then also you were mentioning the politics, incredibly complicated and exciting. A lot for a relatively small country to have so many political parties and so much movement back and forth between the parties, and now we have a new party that's been established. A lot of it's for being such a quiet and pastoral place from the outside, you see that there's this, behind the scenes, a lot of activity and movement on the political side of the house. So it's kind of interesting to see these two parts of Lesotho, how they work together. So it's interesting, and as an official with the Department of State, it's fascinating to learn about the politics and the history and the culture. That's why I like this job. I don't just hop in for a few weeks or a few days and then go back. I live here, and I will live here for the next several years with my family. So it gives me a chance to really get steeped in the culture.
Yeah, talking about family, what's your background, family background and all that, and If you care to share about the family.
Sure. Well, I'm here with my husband and my daughter. I have a 13-year-old daughter. She's here. She's attending school. And my husband is a Department of State employee also. He works for Washington, D.C., but he's here doing telework. I know a lot of us have had experience over the last 2 years doing telework. And we like to joke he was doing telework before it became cool. He's been doing it for years. So that's good. We're all here together, and we're enjoying getting to see the country. As far as my background, I have an interesting, I think, story. On both sides of my family, my mother's side and my father's side, my grandparents were immigrants to the United States. My grandmother, and in fact even my mother, were born in Mexico. And my grandparents on my father's side emigrated from what is now the Slovak Republic in Europe around the early 1900s. So on both sides of my family I have this immigrant story, which I think is very typically American. They were not wealthy. They were working people who came to the U.S., and both of them came to Northern Virginia to work in the steel mills, which were one of the big industries in that part of the U.S. And so there was a vibrant immigrant population. Even in quiet Indiana, up in Northwest Indiana, there were a lot of immigrants who were working in the steel mills. And so I'm the product of this immigrant story, which again I think is very typically American. I think sometimes when people see me, they aren't expecting me to be the U.S. ambassador or the envoy. They have in their minds maybe a diplomat that they've seen in the movies, someone who frankly doesn't look like me. But I think that part of my message as I represent the U.S. is to let people know that Americans don't all look like one model. We are, a melting pot. We have immigrants from literally all over the world that have come to America and have made it their home and have, sought to join that American mosaic, that American quilt. And so I feel like, having immigrants on both sides of my grandparents, on both grandparents' side, really reflects that American heritage. And that story that we like that we need to show the world.
I was gonna ask you who you were supporting when the men's soccer team played Mexico for the World Cup qualifiers. Which side were you on, or you were torn in between, or something like that?
Well, unfortunately, I do not. This is the one thing that I have. I do not follow sports. I know that is almost un-American. I had a former boss who would joke with me that I would joke with him that I don't follow sports. He's, are you sure you're even an American? I'm sorry, I was born without the sports gene. So yes, it's a terrible thing to admit. I know, and Indiana is known for basketball. That is the sport that Indiana is really known for. But
not even the Super Bowl. We watch it. Maybe most of the music.
I watch it for the commercials in the U.S. That's when they unveil all the big commercials.
I see. One of the things that's maybe pretty obvious at this point in time is we've seen quite a number of females making it to very important positions in the U.S. In government, judiciary, and all that. We've seen the likes of Madeleine Albright before. We've seen Condoleezza Rice before. So this is the thing that we are seeing. But do you think enough is happening in terms of where we are interested in this? Because in Lesotho we are still struggling. Back in '97, Lesotho joined other SADC countries in what was called the Gender Protocol, and what that was about was to say that by 2005, at least 30% of the positions in government and related institutions should be reserved for women, and that should grow to 50% by the time we get to 2015. But we're nowhere near the 30% right now in 2022. Would you, maybe from an American perspective, do you think that enough is being done? Would you care to share the American experience? Would you care, is enough being done with regards to the gender issues, gender parity and things like that? And if there are any lessons for Lesotho and other SADC countries as well? Because we see there's no SADC country. Rwanda is outside SADC. That's the one that we know that has surpassed the 30% benchmark, but it's not even in SADC. Yeah.
Well, I have to say that, the U.S., as you mentioned, has had a number of milestones, including now we have a vice president that is a woman, not just a woman, but a woman of African and South Asian descent.
Mm-hmm.
So we are making strides. However, I think there's room for more. I think, statistics have shown that women make up 51% of the population globally, so, they should also be 51% of the representation and leadership. So I think there was a famous story, I believe it is former Supreme Court Justice Ruth Bader Ginsburg, who was interviewed and was asked how many women should be on the Supreme Court. And she said something like along the lines of, well, there should be 9, because for 200 years you've had all men on the Supreme Court, and now you have just a few women, so really for the next 200 years it should be all women, and then we would have parity. So I thought that was an interesting way of looking at things, that for so long the model has been mostly males in leadership, that having a few women in leadership really isn't a balancing of the scales. It is a good start. So I think that is something that all nations, including the U.S., including Lesotho, including others, could really take to heart. I don't see how any society, including the U.S., can achieve when half of that society is being held back. For true success, all members of society, women and men, should be encouraged to take leadership roles. So, it's like trying to do anything with one hand tied behind your back. It's much harder. When you can have both hands working together, clearly it's going to be more successful. So I think that's something that all nations, including ours, including Lesotho, could definitely take away.
Thank you very much. I think maybe for me the last issue would be, as you come into Lesotho at this point in time, perhaps it might still be too early to ask this, but maybe it might just be asked anyway. What would your priorities be? What issues are you looking at addressing? What issues are close to your heart so far from what you've seen in the country?
So many issues. Clearly, the U.S. is involved in and has been involved in many areas of life here in Lesotho. Clearly, we've had a commitment through Peace Corps, 54 years. We have had Peace Corps volunteers here. We're hoping, should COVID allow, we're hoping to return volunteers. So that would be wonderful by the end of this year. Of course, you know that we've been involved with PEPFAR on the anti-HIV/AIDS front for about 15 years here in Lesotho, and that's a commitment that we have had. We've seen tremendous success at getting to epidemic control. So clearly that's something we have been and will continue to be focused on. And of course we have the MCC Compact. That is hopefully the second compact will be coming into force very soon. We're very excited about that. And of course, as part of that, we're looking at improving healthcare, building on the success of the first compact, as well as our interventions through PEPFAR. We're looking to try to support the agricultural sector, to make it something that is a true business, entrepreneurial, that will affect livelihoods for particularly women and youth, as two groups of people that are very often engaged in agriculture, but not in a subsistence level. We want them to go beyond that, to make it truly a business where people can, have good livings and succeed in agriculture. And then also, along with the entrepreneurial side of things, we'll be working with the government to try to determine what are the issues that are holding back entrepreneurship. How can we help the private sector take off, those small and medium enterprises? They're so key to growth of the economy. So how can we work with them to make that happen? Of course, we continue to support human rights, rights of women, anti-gender-based violence, inheritance rules, things that will allow, again, that half of the population to continue to advance and grow. Similarly, we're continue to support anti-trafficking in persons. Modern slavery is evil, and I think everyone and anyone should be opposed to it, and so that is something that the U.S. government has continued to press for greater and more action, and we will continue to do the same. So those are some of the big picture items. I know that we have so many other projects that we're working on. I was pleased to visit a school that the Peace Corps has supported, that the U.S. Ambassador's Self-Help Fund bought 100 desks for. So it's everything from, intervening in a particular school with some support all the way to these, big scale $300 million MCC compact. So we have a lot that we're hoping to achieve, most of all in partnership with the people of Lesotho. I think partnership is something that is a theme that we have, and we will continue to press as we move forward, that it isn't a unilateral U.S. government on its own, but really only with the government and most importantly the people of Lesotho can we achieve. I should also mention, since you asked, we'll be monitoring and I'll say observing, not monitoring, observing the elections as they come up, and you will hear me talk about free, fair, transparent, but most of all free of violence. Elections that reflect the will of the people of Lesotho, that are, the U.S. government has no issues with the outcome. We have no opinion on as to who should win, but rather that it is, again, free, fair, free of violence, and that reflects the will of the people. So you'll hear me say that a lot in the months to come, because that is what we want for the people and the government of Lesotho.
Thank you very much.
Yes.
That's
a good overview. Yes.
Before the invasion of Ukraine by Russia, it was predicted that at least 36 million in Southern Africa are going to need food handouts of some sort. And Lesotho has been a perennial feature on countries that need food handouts. How do you think, what would you suggest a country of Lesotho's size? You've been all over the place, you've a lot of experiences. How do you think a country like Lesotho can make its own food provision sustainable? Because we have this donor dependency, where whether we have good trains or not, we still depend on handouts.
Well, I think certainly that's going to be one of the goals of the MCC Compact. Again, how to transform agriculture from something that is, people who are doing it are barely making a living, to turning it into business. What equipment do they need? What crops do they need? Do they need access to credit? Looking at the factors that keep people from supporting it, having it to where it supports them and their family in a good lifestyle, versus just barely making it day to day, year to year. So I think that's something that we'll be looking forward to. Our collectives needed. Like, what are the ways that we can turn agriculture into a going concern that, again, will support particularly young people and women, because we see women already are in many ways the lead on agricultural endeavors here in Lesotho. So that's something that I think we're hoping to accomplish with the MCC Compact. So we'll be working on that.
Okay. Any special, apart from agriculture, any special dispensation that can come for women, for instance, in the MCC?
Well, I don't know specifically on women. I know that that's going to be one of the issues that we'll be looking at. I will also say that AGOA is one of the areas where I think, again, there already are, there's 6,500 products that are allowed under AGOA. Including agricultural products, including handicrafts. So in this country, it's mostly focused on textiles, but that is really only a very small part of what AGOA can do. And even with AGOA, we see that many of the workers are women, but Again, if we could expand that to some of these other areas and encourage a wider use of AGOA, again, that could go hand in hand with some of the MCC work, some of these provisions. And again, in handicrafts and agriculture, we already see that women are involved. So by giving them an opportunity to scale that up and to, get their goods to U.S. markets, it would in turn, increase their standard of living. So, we're hoping that all these various projects and programs we have build together to create opportunities for women, for everyone, but specifically for women and young people as well.
Sorry to take you back to, we were speaking about agriculture and with specific focus on women. One of the things that a lot of people say about Lesotho, which they say is holding back women, particularly their progress in terms of agriculture, are the type of laws that are the inheritance laws and the like that generally prohibit women from inheriting and therefore owning the land. Is it something that you are looking at? Is it something that you are engaging the authorities on, maybe with a view to a reform of some of those inheritance laws to allow women to inherit and even own the land? Because that's probably one of the prerequisites. If you're going to do full-time, full large-scale commercial farming, you have to own it. It can be used as collateral and things like that. But then if you don't own it, you can't even put it up as security.
Well, I learned today that the National Assembly had completed their review of the Letoroli laws. I think I'm pronouncing it correctly. And that it was being referred now to the Senate for review. And I was told that the Senate will take up to 31 days maximum to review those laws, and then we'll send it to the King for signature. So I think I've been told that this is something that has been under discussion for quite some time. So it was very encouraging to see it reach this next stage of actually passing the National Assembly, and then again now going to the Senate. So that's something that I've been very, very encouraged to see. I think that as it moves forward, we'll see the people of Lesotho again through their representatives in the National Assembly and through their representatives in the Senate, ultimately changing the laws to fit what they need. So I think it's an encouraging sign.
Thank you.
Herbert.
Yeah, I'm good.
Anything else?
No, I
Good.
think we are pretty much good on the personality profile.
Okay, great. If there's anything else you want to know, I'm happy. I'm here. So
Yeah, I think for the personality.
So,
Yeah.
you've been here for 2 months. What do you do for fun when you're here?
mostly I spend time with my family, which is nice. I have also been starting to learn a little bit of Sesotho, which is unfortunately not as much as I would like to, but I can say, Bomele montate, dumela, kele boha, the little, the little phrases that you use when you are talking to people. But I would like to learn more Sesotho. I think that is the language that most people here speak. So, to communicate, to be an ambassador, you should try to communicate with everyone. I mean, clearly I talk to the government, I talk to, other embassies, I talk to people there, but I also want to talk to everyone. So to do that, I think learning a little more Sesotho would help me. I don't know that I'll be fluent, but that's one of my goals. So I've started learning a little bit. I watch TV. I just finished Bridgerton. I think along with a lot of the rest of the world, I Netflixed Bridgerton recently. And I've been reading. I read a lot of science fiction. I'm kind of a nerd. I watch Star Trek and I read science fiction. So I've been enjoying the works of Andy Weir. He wrote The Martian. He wrote Project Hail Mary. There are a few books along that line, and I really enjoy his works because they have a lot of optimism, a lot of sort of can-do. How do you resolve issues? How do you, work? Some of his works are about teamwork. One of them is about not cross-cultural, but really cross-species understanding. And I was reading and thinking, it's kind of like diplomacy, you know.
Yeah.
But ultimately, with survival as the theme, you know, survival as a species, and so that was fascinating to me. So I like to, I'm kind of a nerd, so it goes along with the sports thing. Is that I like science fiction, so yeah, that's what I do for fun.
No, thank you very much. I think we are,
The recording.
Nice.
Yeah.